All right,
Are you good, Brian?
stay away from that.
You can have a turn it on.
Yeah, we actually helped him pretty bad.
All right, thank you all for coming this afternoon. I'm Michael Sussman. I've been asked to serve as counsel for the accused, Mr. Grafton E. Thomas. Kim Thomas is to my right. This is Grafton's mother. And Reverend Wendy Page, the Methodist Church in Harriman, where Miss Thomas and her son more occasionally attended, is to my left. First, I want to extend to those who were victimized and injured in this assault our deepest sympathy and hope that they recover very promptly. Obviously, to the Jewish community, certainly as it's being portrayed by some, this is an incident which is deeply affecting and scary. I hope what I'm about to say will dispel at least some of that and serve as something of an antidote to comments made by our governor and our president with regard to this situation. Before I get to all that, I hand-delivered this morning a letter to the Rockland County District Attorney's Office with my notice of appearance, and I stated as follows. From my initial review of the matter, it appears clear that a mental health evaluation needs to be conducted of my client. I would consent to entry of an order of examination by county court and would expect that the same will require an in-hospital evaluation for a period of at least 30 days, as is contemplated by the Criminal Procedure Law 730.23 and 730.31. I will need access to my client for evaluation by our retained psychiatrist. I also would like access to all available discovery, including any statements made by my client, and demand that he not be subjected to interviews or interrogations by members of law enforcement absent my presence or the presence of someone from my office. We spoke a little while ago with Mr. Michael Dujanchik, who is the individual at least identified publicly as the attorney on the matter. He indicated to our office that a more senior attorney, Dominic Cristino, as I understand it, will be handling the matter for the Rockland County District Attorney. And when I got back a few moments ago, I saw a notice of grand jury proceeding for January 3rd at 9:30 a.m., signed by the acting district attorney, Mr. Jalise. So that is the status of the matter, at least in a formal way. I'll be speaking with forensic psychiatrists who I hope will be able to have access to Grafton promptly, as I did this morning, to speak with him and begin the assessment process. The FBI and law enforcement did extensive investigation through a search warrant at the home in Greenwood Lake. We were able this morning to go to the home, Reverend Page and I, and review scores of papers which frankly show the ramblings of a disturbed individual, but there is no suggestion in any of those ramblings and pages of writing of an anti-Semitic motive, of any anti-Semitism. I spent about 35 minutes speaking with Grafton Thomas this morning, and while obviously I can't disclose the detail of that conversation, I can tell you that I heard nothing in that conversation that confirmed in any way, shape, or manner that he's a domestic terrorist, that he intentionally targeted, even though it seems somewhat strange to say this given the circumstances, I was certainly celebrating Hanukkah that night myself, that he targeted this in that sense. Now, I can't get into the detail of what he was doing and why he was doing it. I'm not sure he can honestly yet get into that detail or understand his own behavior. But I do feel it important to say to the members of the community and law enforcement that from what I understand to this date, this is the action of a individual who for a long time has decompensated. He's been treated in mental health facilities. I won't right now comment on the nature and quality of that treatment. I think over time people will be able to form their own conclusions about that. But it may be that he was non-compliant with medications which were prescribed to deal with his severe depression, and other manifestations of psychosis. They were not being dealt with appropriately. His involvement in the criminal justice system up to the age of 37 and a half has been minimal, though not non-existent. It's been minimal. There don't seem to be incidents of violence or acting out that we're aware of, or that are part of the record that I've had access to. With all that being said, I hope that both sides can agree on a time period for the evaluation of this gentleman so that his true psychiatric nature can be discerned and that we can proceed accordingly. Ms. Thomas has indicated to me that given her level of upset, she's not prepared to speak to the media, but I did want her to come today. She obviously is deeply concerned about those who were victimized by this, as well, of course, her own son and his status. She is a registered nurse. She's worked at a hospital in New York City for many years. She's come out of public housing projects to own a home in Greenwood Lake in New York and bring her son up in a manner which was as positive as possible. She's a native of Guyana. She did, in 1986, gain citizenship in the United States, as I understand it, and she has been a law-abiding and contributing member of our community. I already know that people have written me all sorts of crazy things about immigration status and all sorts of accusations and allegations. I think at a time like this, being calm as is possible, not responding with a great deal of hysteria and over-dramatization, not allowing political leaders to make this into something it is not, is of paramount public importance. And when I got a call from Reverend Page yesterday at about 6:30 in the evening and told me that she knew the family, I immediately realized that before a narrative gets too set in stone and before political leaders use this as a means of demagoguing about a particular issue, we need to know the facts. And that's a more difficult process to amass and assemble, but it's an important process before we take this to places where it really need not go. Reverend Page, you want to say any words?
I would like to say that we must look at the symbol of hope of the menorah that stood, and that stood long ago also, with the oil that was still burning. And we have to acknowledge that Grafton has experienced a long history of mental health. And that should be the focus, not terrorism. Mental health.
Just a few other basic facts that may be of importance to you or may not be, but you should have access to them, and you'll find in dealing with me that I'm going to try to be as transparent as possible about what I know that doesn't trespass on attorney-client privilege. Grafton was school president at his high school in Newtown in Queens. From there, he joined the Marines. He was in the Marines for a short period of time and sustained injury when he was there and left the Marines. He held a series of jobs, and from what I've read in the papers that were left, which are literally papers from the late 1990s that I've had a chance to look at, although I can't tell you in the hour I absorbed every detail of all of them, it appears that he had very neat handwriting and was coherent in attending to his affairs in those years. He had a number of different jobs, but it appears he went to college late on some sort of football scholarship, perhaps, to William Patterson. He was in his early 20s after having various jobs and being in the Marines. These were fairly short-term jobs, and it appears that sometime within the last 10 to 15 years, I can't be more exact, he suffered a decompensation which has been progressive and ongoing, causing, at least in his home, to be present scripts and pills for major depressant disorder. In speaking with him, he was able to explain his behavior with reference to various auditory hallucinations and, one might say, demons. And his explanations were not terribly coherent, which is what leads me to feel it critical that fairly immediately we have psychiatric evaluation done of him, not weeks after the event, but as, in a sense, as close as is possible. If anybody has any questions, we'll try to answer those questions. Respect each other, please, and don't scream. I'll recognize you if you just put your hand up, please.
Mr. Sussman,
Sir.
why wasn't he committed during the May 19th hearing if they knew that he was at that time suffering from such a severe mental illness?
It's premature for me to speak to what others did or didn't do, quite honestly. What I can tell you is that his mother has reached out over time on a number of occasions to mobile mental health and other entities trying to get services, if you will, and direct services for her son. Grafton did live in Wurtsboro for a period of time where he's had an apartment outside of her home, and she, obviously given his age, has been unable to control his activities directly. She sought, though, assistance. Why, in a particular occasion, he was not treated differently, I think individuals are going to have to account for that, and I hope that's part of any inquiry and investigation. But I think it's a fair question. Yes, ma'am?
Can you speak to the information that's come out in the last hour about what was found inside of the home? Handwritten journals expressing anti-Semitic sentiments, and a whole list of other things I'm sure you've seen.
I've not seen.
Oh, you haven't seen?
I haven't seen. The journals that we've had access to, the writings we've had access to, which I actually have here, probably 75 pages of rambling notes, I saw absolutely nothing that related to anti-Semitism, Judaism, or anything else. So I can't speak directly to that. I haven't seen the information yet. Sir?
Well, related though, I mean,
Sure.
have you seen the federal complaint filing hate crime charges against your
We
client?
haven't seen that. We haven't gotten it here in the office. So
Can you respond generally to this filing by federal prosecutors?
can't respond because we haven't seen it, so I can't respond generally to something I haven't seen or specifically. But my impression from speaking with him is that he needs serious psychiatric evaluation, and that is the primary focus. I don't know whether those who are making these charges have spent a moment speaking with him or relating to him. But my impression from what I have read in my conversation with him is there are severe psychiatric issues. Whether those manifested in anti-Semitism at a moment, I can't tell you. I don't know. That's not what I heard when I spoke with him. Go ahead.
Can you explain, you said that he was suffering from depression, if that's right, and can you kind of expand on that, or expand on any other mental health issues, psychological issues that he was dealing with?
What I can tell you is that for a period of about 10 to 12 years, he's been classified as Social Security disability insured based on his mental status. So his mental illness is not something that was developed in reference to a defense in this case. It's been recognized by the authorities who provide benefits to individuals who have such mental incapacity. And he's been recognized as I said, for a number of years.
Would you refer to him as, being diagnosed as depressed?
I diagnosed him, I would view him as being mentally ill. And the question of whether he's paranoid, schizophrenic, those are questions I think someone who has expertise has to look at. I believe if you look at prior diagnoses, you'll find that in records. But again, that's not the same as saying that everyone who has those diagnoses acts out in this way. People who have auditory hallucinations and believe they're following some script, and there was reference made to that in my conversation with him, are of one sort of mental illness. There are plenty of people whose mental illness is controlled by medication and they're not dangerous in this way, and they don't act out in this way. So I don't want this to become an assault on those who have mental illness either. That's equally inappropriate. But I'm dubious from what I've heard, both from him and what I saw in his home and when I've spoken to his mother and other family members. They have someone who is acting out of a terroristic, anti-Semitic framework.
Can you
Yes,
speak about
sir.
what triggered
Hold on, we'll get to it in a minute.
Given what you all are saying and what you said yesterday, I wonder if his mental state had deteriorated in recent months. So in the federal complaint that they're referencing, they quote from journals and Google searches in which he searched about Hitler and hating the Jews and local places of worship and referenced the Hebrew Israelite movement. Did anyone see this, and had his state changed in recent weeks or months
Well, when you say did anyone see it, I can't tell you if anyone saw it.
that you've spoken?
I think it's fair to say that his mother did not see it, and that his mother saw manifestations of behavior, not that sort of behavior which caused her concern. I know, for instance, bleach was found in the vehicle, and there was a good deal of public discussion about bleach. From reviewing receipts in his possession, bleach, and looking at his home and seeing the quantity of bleach around, he was obviously very fixated with germophobic behavior, concerned about being infected, washing his hands 50 times a day, behavior which is not normal behavior. And so, again, I have not seen the federal complaint, and there may certainly have been this kind of fixation as well. But I don't believe anyone close to him saw that. Blaze? And then we'll come over to here.
Can we talk about what his mental health diagnoses might have been over the past few years, and what, if any, medications he might have been on currently?
Sure. He was on medication like Prozac. He was also on Seroquel. And there are other medications. Latuda is a bottle that we found. There's a prescription for it, and we also found a bottle in the list that the government left with the mother showed that they also took a bottle. That, as I understand it, is an antidepressant. So antipsychotic medications, antidepressant medications, those sorts of medications. Now, again, whether he was medication compliant is another issue. At least preliminarily, I believe he was not medication compliant, and certainly in the last month, that's my impression from my conversations, which may again have led to the level of decompensation and destabilization that we see manifest. There was a question, Chris McKenna and then the gentleman.
Did he ever work in Monsey, or do you have any other explanation for what led him to that particular place?
The work record that I'm aware of does not show any work in Monsey. He worked for a while in Newburgh in a warehouse. He worked in other locations that I have been able to identify through pay records that I found in his possessions and otherwise. I see no particular work history in Monsey or any particular connection to Monsey. To answer your question, yes?
Can you talk a little bit about what triggered him that night, or what his motivation was? I know you hinted at something earlier about maybe voices or demons or something.
So again, this is very preliminary, and I think that what I can tell you is simply that there seems to be an alternative universe looking at his writings and talking with him. There seems to be an alternative universe and a set of what I called earlier auditory hallucinations or voices that are present for him, which is not unusual for people who suffer from his level of psychosis. He seemed to indicate that there was a direction that he was following that evening. That direction, as I got it from him, did not involve violence toward other persons. It involved destruction of some property. That obviously got out of hand. How that got out of hand, I can't tell you. I wasn't inside. But my impression is that the situation he found where he went in was not the situation he expected to find. And that may have been a trigger for him. As you heard from Mr. Day, there was, and others at the county earlier today, there was a response, people throwing furniture and otherwise things were happening in there. I can't at this moment reconstruct what happened in there, but I think that may have some impact on his mentality.
Did that home have any significance for him? Did he know to go in there? Had he previously been there?
No, I believe that what triggered him going in there was, as I said earlier, some voice that told him to do something there, but nothing that is objective, or that you could say he had a prior history at that home, or knew someone there, or had a grudge against someone there. Okay, anyone else? Yes, right.
Was, how involved was he with the Black Israelite movement?
I can't answer that question definitively. I heard nothing from him which suggested any association. I know that in Jersey, the Black Israelites were involved in the events, the tragic events of several weeks ago, so I assume that prompts a question. But I know of nothing that connected him to that, nor did he say anything which led me there. Yes?
I'm just wondering if you're familiar with Kendra's law, or any other laws that may have applied to his previous appearances in court, and if you have any criticism of how that was handled, and maybe counseling that he maybe should have gone through state-ordered counseling as opposed to his other encounters with the criminal justice system?
Again, it's premature to get into a full-blown critique of what happened previously, what went wrong, what may have gone right, what could have been done. History moves in one direction, and we're where we are. We have to take lessons from this situation and utilize them, I think. But again, even far premature to know what all those lessons are.
Did he ever undergo counseling of any kind that was state-ordered or private? Are you aware of that?
The answer is yes, but again, I don't know the details.
Two questions.
Okay.
You indicated that Mrs. Thomas had grown increasingly concerned with her son's behavior recently.
Over a course of years and recently.
And can you give us detail on what exactly that looked like? And was she afraid of her son?
No, she was not afraid of her son, and she had a positive relationship with her son, to my understanding, and a loving relationship with him and he toward her. I think that's a fair statement. I think that she, as a nurse, she's an RN, she's been in nursing many years, saw signs of, I'm using the term decompensation, but signs of emotional ability, instability, and as I said earlier, reached out on a number of occasions. But again, getting to the gentleman's question, the responses thereto were middling.
Was there anything that day, that
No.
Saturday, that
No.
stood out? And Wendy, I know you're reacting to a lot of this. Can you speak of your interactions with Mr. Thomas and your characterization of him?
I received an email yesterday saying that I shouldn't depict him as a non-violent person. And I told them back that that is the person that I know. Kim never expressed to me at any point as her pastor for the last more than 10 years that she was afraid of or scared of her son in any way. I've been at visits in the hospital. I've been at visits with him at the house. He's always been a gentle giant with mental illness. And he's very introverted. He doesn't like to be around a lot of people. And he's a vegan. And he's very simple. And there were moments when his sentences, he would have trouble completing sentences. And that would be a clear indicator that he was experiencing something that we don't experience, but he was experiencing it. And from my experience with Grafton, he has been a calm, caring, loving person.
There was an incident where...
Just let this gentleman and then go over here. Go ahead, sir.
And I know that you said that Ms. Thomas is not commenting, but you were at the news conference earlier. We saw you crying. Can someone just talk about how
Sorry, go ahead.
pointed out that you have a close relationship with a gentle man. How are you doing now with this having happened by someone who, as you're saying, has a mental history, also has a history of being gentle and kind? How is Mrs. Thomas doing? How are you who know him doing?
This has been a shock, a total shock. Speaking with Kim this morning, for a little while, it was just like, I just don't believe it. I can't believe this, because it's just not a characteristic that we've seen in Grafton. So for a while, I just told her, you know, you don't have to believe it, but we have to accept that this is the reality of what is now. And I saw Grafton in the hospital, and I questioned things like, can they see that he needs more services? In a way, as a single mother, taking care of a man who has mental illness with the systems that be, and the seeking, I know that she did everything that she could. I know that she took him in when she could. I know that she called mental health hotline when she needed to. I know that she took very seriously the responsibility of caring for Grafton, and also wanting him to come out of it, to develop through it. And there were moments where he showed signs of great improvement, and then there were fallbacks. We could have never known that this was going to happen. It wasn't something that we sat at home and said, oh, look at him, he's playing with knives. No, we didn't see those behaviors.
All right, this gentleman here had a question.
I know you said he had very little to no criminal history, but has anybody spoken to you about an incident on November 20th that he may have been involved in where another man was knifed on his way to a synagogue? Is he a suspect in that?
Well, again, you'll have to ask law enforcement about whether he's a suspect in any other specific incident. I can't really comment. So I have no way of answering your question, because I'm not one of those who'd be investigating that at this point. I'm looking at the circumstances of this event, obviously, because this is what we know he is involved in. I believe he's involved in. Chris?
When was he hospitalized and for how long? Were there multiple instances?
I'm putting together a timeline, which I'll try to disseminate as soon as I have it complete. But in 2019, he was hospitalized. And I believe he was in fact hospitalized on several occasions in 2019. Now, whether these were explicitly for psychiatric care, whether psychiatric issues were raised in the hospitalizations, is less clear to me at the moment. One I'm fairly certain was psychiatrically oriented. The other, it appears to me, may have been tangentially related to psychiatric issues. They may have come up in the sense during the course of hospitalizations that was otherwise indicated. Sir, ma'am, go ahead.
So you mentioned political remarks that had been made earlier. Are you referring in particular to the remarks by the acting Home Secretary Ken Cuchnell and what he said about Mr. Thomas's father being an illegal immigrant coming here under the amnesty program?
Yeah, I think this politicization of immigration, we won't get into a broader conversation of it here today, but it's more than regrettable that events of 30 plus years ago are in any way linked to this. Grafton's father has lived, as I understand it, in Utah for many years. They've had some, but not an extensive relationship, as I understand it, and I don't see any particular connection. So why anyone would, in a sense, stretch and try to make this in any way about immigration is, for me, absurd. Yes? You wanted to say something. Go ahead.
Yes, yes. In the federal complaint, there are a lot of details about, in his journals, about anti-Semitic views. Were you aware of those journals at all?
Not at all. Not at all.
Does it surprise you to hear that they found so many journals?
It does. Well, to find so many journals, we found a lot of papers at the house with scribbles on it.
We found many, many writings, as I think I said before you got here, may not have, but none of those writings have anything to do with Semitism, anti-Semitism, or the like. So,
but does it surprise you to hear that they found journals that specifically express?
It is very surprising. It is very surprising. And, you know, I spoke to Kim yesterday and I said, this seems strange. It just seems strange because it is very surprising. Grafton has never spoken about these things. He's never spoken about anything like that. He's a Christian, and the last time I saw him, we prayed together, and his mother was happy that he allowed me to pray with him. And yeah, No.
Okay, take a
Shocking.
couple more, and let's go around this way again. Go ahead, you start first.
Can you comment at all on a report from a relative that said that he was missing for about a week before this incident and that his whereabouts were unknown?
His mother saw him the Friday, if this was a Saturday, as I understand it, Saturday night, his mother saw him the day before, so I can tell you that with definitiveness. Yes?
I know Mrs. Thomas didn't wanna comment
And
and
will
she's not
not.
ready to make any
Mhm.
statements, but we just wanted to see if this was an opportunity did you wanna say anything to the victims' families at this point?
I've spoken to the victims' families. Don't put her in that position, please. Yes, and then we'll come back here.
Some of his search history on the phone that was recovered from the car he was driving in included searches about temples, prominent companies, and increased police presence in Jewish communities, especially in the days after the Jersey City shootings. Did he discuss with you guys at any point anything about those shootings in Jersey City? Did that come up at any time?
Not at any point. Not at all.
You wanted to say something, I think? What's your question? Right, last question, go ahead.
Has he spoken to investigators? I know that you mentioned in the prayer that you're not allowed to speak to them unless you're present. But how often, if at all, has he spoken to investigators so far?
The statement to me was that he had not spoken with investigators. That's what he told me. I asked, as you heard earlier, for any statements that may have been made by him. It's called 71030 material in the law, and as you know, under the new laws particularly, there's an imperative to get that material quickly to counsel. I haven't had any response to that, but he told me directly he hadn't spoken. Now, whether that's reliable or not, I don't know, but that's what he said. All right, I appreciate everybody's coming, and
We are praying for the families. We have prayed for the families. We will continue to pray for the families. We are very much concerned about anyone who was harmed in this situation. It is a sad situation. But we have hope because we are grateful that there is no one who has passed on from this situation. And we are hoping that this will bring some attention for people who are struggling like Grafton.
Pastor, could you please say and spell your name and give us your title of your church?
Reverend Wendy Page, Harriman United Methodist Church, the Hudson Highlands Cooperative Parish, WENDYPAIGE.
And
Thanks
is it
for
Kim Thompson, or Kim Thomas, I'm sorry?
Kim.
Mr. Sussman, would you be able to show us any, you said you have pages of a handwriting from Mr. Thomas. Is there a page you could show us to give us an indication of what you're saying?
My office. Sir, you can take him into my office.
And also, aside from the computer, do you know what else was taken from the home? You said you had a list of items.
I do know what was taken, at least according to the list.
Right.
This is an example. I mean, I have, as I said, many pages. All right, hold on. Many rambling pages on front and back of writing.
Hold up, please.
Can you read what it says, Mr. Sussman?
Can you turn it around as well?
Sure.
What does it say?
Can you hold it up?
I can hold it and I can read the words, but although its price value is unknown at this point, the dollar amount for the cost of the products range. Subsection of equity, rural, suburban city. Many pages that I found in his papers just have myriads of notes. Occultist cultivation, hence militants, networkers, Merck, AMREC. Anyway, there's just, as I say,
Is that all the stuff you put that stuff there?
I have all sorts of papers here with notes, and as I said, reading through them as we were doing, as I was doing, there was nothing in any of these ramblings that related to religion, particularly anti-Semitism. The other thing I can tell you is I found a resume from it looked like maybe 2001. The resume is very nicely written, handwritten, and it's totally variance. Actually, here it is. Here's this resume from, it looks like it was maybe in 2002, and it's 4 pages, it has references on it, and the handwriting is neat, and it appears entirely coherent. Then I found, as I say, papers that his mother tells me are much more recent, which are Saturn is like unto a commander who at to teach, instruct. And
Is that the more recent stuff?
yeah, the
there?
more recent cards, and it's just.
See the resume, please?
Can I take a picture of that one, the Saturn one?
So, again, this is all very preliminary. I have not seen the federal matter, and obviously I haven't seen any of the diaries yet to make any sense of what's in them. But from speaking with the mother and looking at this, I think we have pretty fair evidence that he was pretty seriously decompensated. Okay, I appreciate everybody coming, and we'll be as transparent as possible in the day.